Okay. As Tom mentioned, my name is Annette Hager. I'm a senior consultant here at KGL Consulting. I'm going to host this and kind of moderate the conversation here. With me today, I have two industry experts, Christian Kohler from the American Diabetes Association and Scott Chernoff from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I will briefly introduce them before we let them speak. Chris is the vice president and publisher for the ADA's professional publications. And in that role, he's responsible for overseeing and guiding business strategies, peer review and publishing policies, production workflows, and general print and online operations for the ADA's highly regarded STM journals, medical management books, professional podcast series, and a lot of other various custom publications. Scott joined AAAS in 2020. He leads their Science Partner Journals Publishing Program, or their SPJ program. He oversees the publishing operations and development of 14 open access journals, as well as new SPJ partnerships and journal launches. Prior to coming to AAAS, he worked at IOP Publishing in a variety of editorial and publishing management roles, interfacing with researchers and editors at all stages of the publication process. So thank you both, Scott and Chris, for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. I'm going to give them the floor in just a minute. First, though, I do want to remind you the chat function is open. Please, as questions come to you, go ahead and put those in chat. We will cover those after Chris and Scott have presented. To lay the groundwork for this session, we are going to explore practical applications of citation data in shaping editorial strategies. I do want to be clear that we're not going to get into the different metrics that are available or different analytical methods. There is just a huge landscape of data, tools, analyses, and all sorts of things we can get into with the citation analysis. It can be really challenging to translate all that data into actionable strategies. So what we want to do in this session is focus on how to harness the citation data to formulate effective editorial strategies. And specifically, we're looking to attract greater volumes and types of high quality content. And this is so important. Most of you, I'm sure this is a review, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Our industry is in a period of transformation, and it has been for quite a while. Over the past 5 to 10 years, some of the most significant changes have included the globalization of academic output. There's a movement towards open business models, and changing dynamics in how people find and engage with information. To simplify a very complex market, in this current environment, journals or portfolios that publish more content are much more likely to succeed than those that publish less. Now, simply publishing more isn't the goal. The idea is to publish more high quality content to advance your journal or portfolio's reputation and impact. So, we're going to look at how citation and bibliometric data can inform strategies to recruit high-quality submission to drive volume and impact. We'll also look at how citation analysis supports development of products to reach new audiences and increase value to existing audiences. Now, I mentioned there's a lot of data available. It's very easy to get lost in the data or start looking at interesting but ultimately low-value analyses. We found that it's very important to articulate what you want to know when you start thinking about citation analysis. So on this slide, I've listed just a small sample of the types of questions that societies and journals can use to frame their thinking about strategy development. And citation and bibliometric analysis can be instrumental in informing any of these questions and many others. So that's the groundwork I wanted to lay. I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, who are going to share their experiences. Scott, I'll let you go first, and I'll go ahead and advance. Just let me know when you need me to advance the slides.
Great, thank you, Annette, and thank you everybody for joining today. I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about how the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, has worked with KGL to use citation analysis to help enhance our new journals and develop a strategy for growing new journals. As Annette said, I'm the product development manager at AAAS, overseeing the Science Partner Journals program. And if you can advance to the next slide, please, I'll tell you a bit more about SPJ, as we call it. So this was launched in 2017 by AAAS. AAAS has been in the publishing business for a long time as the publisher of the Science family of journals. And at this time in 2017, they started to formulate the idea for the Science Partner Journals program to partner with other mission-driven organizations to share the expertise publishing science and share that know-how and the resources with other organizations who are publishing journals. So the SPJ program was designed as an open access publishing program and originally was just launching new journals in partnership with other organizations. So the first journal launched was called Research. The first article was published in 2018. And since then, the program has grown. We currently have 14 open access journals in the SPJ program, pictured at the bottom of the screen. Of course, just wanted to mention that all of the journals in this program are editorially independent. So while AAAS provides the publishing services, production, hosting, distribution, systems, and everything along those lines, the editors and all of the peer review and editorial decisions are made independently externally. Next slide, please. So this was a new program with unique challenges. In 2018, the first two journals began publishing and opening for submissions. And got off the ground and we're doing quite well. But as we approached 2021, we reached out to KGL for some additional assistance. There were some growing pains. The program grew from 2 journals in 2018 to 11 journals in 2020. The staff resources at AAAS were constrained. So the focus at AAAS was largely on operational needs, ensuring that the articles were publishing on time, up, a top quality, that we're troubleshooting any issues with systems and things like this. But there was a little bit less focus on the editorial status of the journals. So it was important that we recognize at AAAS that we put some more attention on understanding that editorial status of the journals. They're new journals, so there weren't any rankings available. They were just starting to apply to Scopus and Web of Science and these other places that provide impact metrics and rankings to compare them to other journals. So a citation analysis seemed like a logical next step to help benchmark the journals and understand if there were opportunities or risks that might not have been apparent since we were so focused on the other operational needs for the journals. We did recognize at AAAS that there were some journal-specific challenges. While submissions in general were increasing, the number of accepted submissions weren't generally increasing. And there are many reasons that could have been, but in general, we believe that there weren't enough high-quality submissions coming into the journals. And we wanted to identify some ways to grow high-quality submissions, not just submissions in general. Some of the journals were doing well in certain subject areas, but in other subtopics weren't getting as many submissions or high-quality submissions. So there were specific topics, sub-areas within certain journals that we wanted to look at to understand where were those papers going instead, or who are the authors publishing in those areas, who are the high-impact researchers in these areas. A third specific journal challenge was that these are new journals again, so the editorial boards are still being developed to some extent. Maybe they were strong in certain subject areas or well represented among certain institutions or countries, but not so much in others. So with all this in mind, we approached KGL in, I believe it was the end of 2020, and formulated a plan for citation analysis. Next slide, please. So we sort of split up this citation analysis into two parts. One was benchmarking the science partner journals. We selected just a few journals to start, I should mention. So for the first project, we were looking at 3 journals. We wanted to benchmark those titles, so look at what they had published so far, what were the topic areas that were being mostly focused on in the journal, how did that compare to what the scope said the journal should be publishing, who were the top cited articles, who were the authors for those articles, what were the 0 cited articles, what are the topics that aren't so interesting to the journal community, things along these lines. The second part of the analysis was to look at competitor journals. So we were able to utilize, for example, the top cited journals from the Science Partner Journal. Where were they citing? That was one way to identify other journals that are publishing similar research. Obviously, we had the editor's input as well. What did they consider overlapping journals? And KGL and AAAS's market knowledge as well. So using these various methods and others, we established this competitor journal list. And then for this program, these brand new journals where we maybe don't have as much data, they haven't published as many articles, it's really useful to use the competitor data and look at that both individually, those specific journals, but also as a whole, start to understand the patterns in this subject area and increase the volume of data that we have available to leverage. So things like authors, institutions, topics that are being heavily cited or well read, or there are lots of articles being published on those topic areas, for example, and recognize where the trends are starting to emerge. On the right there is an example of a chart showing the benchmarking of one of the Science Partner Journal's research. They had a lot of publications coming from corresponding authors in China. And so, as you know, this is just an example of a visual that KGL put together showing the number of publications coming from various institutions, and then how does that compare to the number of citations that are coming from those institutions. So this helps to identify I should mention also that the data set behind this is a lot more detailed. So you can look at, okay, of the 20 articles from Southeast University, there might have just been one article in particular that was particularly highly cited, and we could see that and look at that article and maybe glean some information from that. But overall, it's really interesting to see a lot of effort is being put into getting, let's say, a few articles from City University of Hong Kong, and it's sort of in the middle of the pack. Whereas, the authors affiliated with the Chinese Academy of Sciences are publishing a lot in the journal and are at the high end of number of citations on average. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as a result of the citation analysis, we're able to start to tackle these problems that I mentioned, that there are certain topic areas underrepresented, there's a need to develop editorial boards, that there's a need for increased submission of high quality content. So the citation analysis started to reveal things like countries and institutions that were producing these significant amounts of quality research, and then relate that back to the journal benchmarking exercise. So the journal's editorial board had poor representation among among certain institutions or geographic regions. But the competitor analysis revealed that there's a significant portion of research that's well read and well cited in these regions. So those are possible areas we can look at we can look at those articles or journals that have researchers from these places and identify potential editorial board candidates, or even just reach out to them so that they know more about our journals. Another result is this was something that interested me, was that KGL observed that there were specific international collaborations in specific topic areas that were being published in other journals, but not as much in certain science partner journals. And by large international collaborations, so for example, in astronomy or astrophysics, it's common to have these large international endeavors. There's observatories around the world, and they're all working together to combine their data. These are really important papers and research being done. So this was helpful to help identify this as a gap or opportunity for that should be targeted for outreach. Another result of the citation analysis was noting 0 cited topic areas published in the journals, and then on the opposite side of that, suggesting topics of higher interest to the community. So there were actual topics that started to emerge as potential opportunities that we could provide to the editors as areas that they should target in the future. So on the right there is a table with just one example. It's a long table, but of a topic area. Again, this is around 2021. So COVID-19 was a high impact topic area, of course. And then there were actual proposed articles or special issues within this topic area that we sent along to the editors for consideration. So overall, sorry, next slide, please. Overall, the analysis was really especially useful for the new journals in the Science Partner Journals program that needed to develop their editorial boards and reviewer pools and generate a pipeline of content. And so we're still seeing the results of this. It takes time to develop journals, but overall, we have seen results in the area of reaching out to potential editorial board candidates among the researchers identified by these analyses. And in the cases where people have turned down invitations, it's at least improved the reach of the journal to reach out to these researchers and make them aware of this new journal. And in some cases, they volunteer to be reviewers or can be added to the reviewer pool. And so as we grow the number of submissions and need to rely more on peer reviewers, we now have this larger pool of researchers who we know and have very specific data on. And of course, as we know, that's important for improving author satisfaction, that the review process can be efficient and provide quality reviews. And finally, of course, there have been actual articles that have been commissioned as a result of these analyses on topics that were suggested as very interesting to the journal communities. And we've been able to grow readership and citations of the journals as a result. So I'd like to just conclude by saying, reminding you that these journals were editorially independent, and as the publisher, AAAS was just trying to equip the editors with the data they needed to feel confident in developing their journals. And so this was a really useful exercise that resonated really well with academic editors who love poring over the data and developing a strategy in collaboration with the publisher. And so I would definitely recommend this as an approach to take in collaboration with editors. And it's really useful to have that data to equip them with so that they feel confident in going out and developing their journals. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. Chris, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Annette. And thank you, Scott. My name is Chris Kohler. I'm the Vice President and Publisher for ADA's Professional Publications. And for my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the strategy side of how we use bibliometric data to identify new content and new products. So let's begin. Just, standard introduction of ADA's mission statement. I think it's pretty obvious. If given the name of our organization, it's to prevent and cure diabetes and to improve the lives of all people affected by diabetes. Our professional publications program supports the mission by doing our best to publish timely, high-impact information for diabetes professionals and disseminating that information as efficiently and broadly as possible. Next slide, please. So our professional publications program consists of 4 journals: a basic research journal that mainly focuses on research in animal models, pathophysiological and mechanistic research, clinical research journal, Diabetes Care, and then 2 translational journals, journals that are taking the research published in Diabetes Care, our clinical research journal, and then discussing the implications and practical applications of that research for a primary care audience, and for the other journal, a diabetes education specialist audience. In addition, we have a professional books program. We have a compendia series, which we'll talk about later. We publish our meeting abstracts, ADA standards of care, which are our treatment guidelines, professional newsletters, and various multimedia, which I'll talk about later as well. So we try to cover the spectrum of scientific and medical related information, from research bench, the laboratory bench, to clinical applications, bedside, and then to community outcomes, the block. Next slide, please. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with this acronym that was graciously shared by Colette Bean at an SSP webinar. It's a military acronym used to describe highly unpredictable and complex situations. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And as Annette mentioned earlier in the introduction to this presentation, the scholarly publishing community as a whole basically finds ourselves in this situation. You could say that society as a whole finds ourselves, world affairs finds ourselves in this situation. From a publishing perspective, really since high-speed internet became ubiquitously available, the publishing industry has been greatly disrupted in a constant state of change. OA is obviously a big part of that. Regulatory advances like the Sunshine Act have disrupted revenue generating opportunities. The proliferation of more journals have made life a little bit more complicated for independent journals like ADA. And of course, all things COVID, misinformation, disinformation, again, politics and world affairs. It's very complicated. Love the term VUCA. And again, thank you, Colette, because it's much more elegant than the term we've been using internally, which is a compound noun that begins with cluster and ends with a 4-letter word, which leads me to the next slide. We've internally introduced the term cluster VUCA, which I've, I think, very appropriately used AI to generate this image of a cluster VUCA, given the added anxieties possibly associated with AI as well. Annette, could you advance 3 slides? My slides are out of order. And 1 more. Thanks. So in terms of how we analyze citation analyses, as Scott mentioned, our editors are very much interested in kind of contextualizing citation-related data and determining what's being cited, what's not being cited, what's being cited in our competitor journals, what is being rejected by our teams, and then being cited elsewhere. In addition, and I mentioned earlier, and I should say some other things that we look at citation data internally is, of course, to identify emerging trends and to develop special topic collections and things of that nature, fill editorial board gaps, but also to identify what we consider like technical glitches. For instance, we realized a few years ago that some of our review articles weren't being meta tagged as review articles, and therefore, if somebody was searching in, say, PubMed for review plus whatever this term is, our content wasn't appearing in that search result. So we had to correct those kind of meta tagging issues. We also saw, thanks to an analysis that KGL did, that some articles that should be considered non-citable items, but citing items in the impact factor calculation were being mistakenly included as citable items. For instance, commentaries. So we published a number of commentaries. A handful of them were included in the impact factor calculation in the denominator as a citable item, when they should only be included in the numerator as citing items. So correcting issues like that. When the impetus for us to originally reach out to KGL was to get some more information related to submission related data, and although we had that data, but an analysis of section analyses, high cited versus non-cited, editorial analyses, geographical analyses, and funding analyses, because we saw this dip in our submission rate for our basic research journal Diabetes. Our concern was that OA mandates were having an effect on this submission rate. Based on our analysis, we determined that wasn't necessarily the case. Comparable journals saw additional declines and a 2020 bump related to COVID over a similar term for basic research. But we wanted to see if there was, if we could pinpoint any specific regions or funders or institutions, which we'll work on in a later project, that were at one point high contributors to our content, but now no longer are. And there could be any reasons for that. It just could be just the entire corpus of literature research that is currently taking place has diminished. It obviously has to do with the proliferation of competing journals in the field of endocrinology, metabolism. 8 or 9 years ago, there were 89 journals. Now there's 145 in that field. And diabetes is a cross-disciplinary journal, so it's probably being affected by the proliferation of journals in, say, obesity studies, genetics, metabolomics, cell biology. But nevertheless, I think the next step for us in terms of a citation analysis and a publishing analysis is to determine, okay, maybe this is just related to just the overall increased competition for attracting submissions. But again, are there authors or departments or institutions who would frequently submit and publish in this particular journal, but are now submitting and publishing it elsewhere? And if so, are those papers highly cited? Are they in journals with lower impact factors, but they're still getting high citations? So I think that's the next step in our analysis, and look forward to working with KGL on that. So if we could go back 2 slides now, sorry. And one more. So Along those same lines, I mentioned Plan S and the OA mandates earlier, and just the general cluster of evocability we find ourselves in. We also worked with KGL just to get a good handle of how much content we're looking at that will be impacted by the Nelson memo and Plan S. It's something that we've been trying to keep tabs on, since 2018 in terms of Plan S. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just highlight the fact that our basic research journal, Diabetes, 75% of the content that we've published over 3 years is funded by U.S. federal entities and Plan S supported institutions. So, with all things remaining equal, we're seeing ourselves in a situation where, regardless of whether we want to adapt or not, we're going to obviously have to adapt if we want to maintain the same volume of publishing and our same quote unquote market share in the field of endocrinology and metabolism. Next slide, please. So in this article that shows the number, the proportion of articles published in Diabetes Journal that are funded by U.S. agencies, Plan S, and then other agencies, and how often those articles are cited relative to the other institutions. So we can see that U.S. federal agents, U.S. funded content and Plan S funded content are cited higher on average than all the average article published in Diabetes. So obviously it's in our best interest to find a way to continue to accommodate those particular papers. And then I guess we can go up 2 slides now. So we are discussing transitioning Diabetes to a gold OA model. Obviously there are challenges associated with that everybody's very familiar with: less gross and net revenue, relying on a single source of revenue that now is even kind of, will that be available with some of the chatter regarding APCs? The timing of it can be a little tricky, because we would imagine that we would take more of a incremental approach to maybe with the tier-based modeling, similar to what ACS is doing, and then seeing how that works, and then maybe determining whether we need to make a transition to full gold OA, even though, as Lisa said, green OA is basically gold OA. And then, of course, Diabetes is a benefit of ADA professional membership. And so we would need to really repurpose and restructure all of our member benefits and how we provide member, particularly to this audience. Lab-based researchers doing research in focused on the biological mechanisms of diabetes and their related complications. It's a small proportion of our overall professional membership, but an incredibly important portion of our membership. And if we don't have Diabetes Journal as a member benefit for that audience, do they have that much incentive to remain a member? So it's very complicated. The next slide, please. So, we've talked with our board about making that transition. They've given us kind of tacit approval to do so. We haven't committed to it. Again, I think we're probably going to take more of an incremental approach similar to ACS, but nevertheless, they have told us that we need to be vigilant about restructuring, diversifying, expanding our membership offerings and our subscription offerings. And basically the message is find new ways to make money is what it comes down to. And so if we go to the next slide, our usage and citation metrics are a part of that strategy in determining how we can expand and diversify our content offerings and revenue streams. We rely on a number of information usage, citation, bibliometric data is just kind of one tool in our toolkits. We're heavily dependent on the guidance of our editors and editorial committees. We try to make sure that any new programs and titles, concepts we launch are aligned with ADA's standards of care, which are clinical practice guidelines and are continually updated. Has to be supported by an evidence base. And we rely on other forms of data beyond usage and citation metrics. We get a lot of interesting insights through queries to our call center, oddly enough, and queries to our support staff. That gives us a little insight on, okay, we were getting a lot of questions on blood glucose monitors, now it's hypoglycemia. There's a relationship there. Or, oh, suddenly, you know, sleep questions about sleep health. There's an opportunity there. And then if we have when we use usage and citation metrics and bibliometric data to kind of support these other forms of information. So next slide. In our efforts, you know, I mentioned earlier that we use data to inform kind of new topic collections and new programs. But more often than not, you know, our diabetes is, you know, obviously a much more narrow focused set of titles that ADA has compared to science or larger publishers, general medical publishers, publishers dealing with life sciences or social sciences. So we tend to know, you know, beforehand what the new hot topic is, or who the new you know, up and coming researchers are. So more so than developing content collections within a specific title, we use data from our other titles to inform collection data from one title, for instance, diabetes care, to inform collections in one of our sister titles, such as Diabetes Spectrum, which is more of a translational journal. Diabetes Spectrum publishes in every issue a topic collection related to a specific area. And so we'll use citation data from Diabetes Care to identify topics and potential contributors and guest editors for the collection in Diabetes Spectrum. Likewise, next slide. With our professional books program, we will do the same. So in about a year ago, we started adding about 30 titles of professional book content to our journal platform behind paywalls, and with a journal-like layout and format, and the bells and whistles associated with journal hosting and online display. Our goal is beginning in 2024 to make this content available as a membership and subscription offering. We're going to bundle the books based on common topics. For instance, you know, one might be related to medication, one might be strictly related to type 1, and one might be related to type 2, exercise and diabetes, nutrition and diabetes, etc. When we develop these, when we determine which topics to include in a bundle or to host on the online platform, obviously we relied on, you know, sales data as well as topical usage and citation metrics, but we're also using journal-related citation metrics and access metrics as part of our proposals for gaining internal approval to publish a new book. So in order to publish a book at ADA, we have to submit a proposal. It goes through a review by our Science and Healthcare Committee, and it's kind of like a grant application in which we have to provide supporting evidence to justify the need and interest. So the next slide, please. So in our editorial proposals, we usually include an appendix that usually starts with kind of Is it related to a standard of care or ADA update? Those are highly cited papers. Yes. And then we'll lead with other, and then we'll follow that with other supporting research studies or review articles on the same topic in order to, again, justify the need and make the case for that particular project. Typically, we include citations and Mendeley saves because Mendeley saves are typically predictive of citations. And if you show in the next slide, if it's a newer paper, obviously it hasn't had time to accrue citations. And so that's also where Mendeley saves come in handy, showing that in the first month post-publication that they've received 10 Mendeley saves is a good sign. Next question, or next slide, please. In an effort to fill revenue gaps, particularly related to advertising, reprints, licensing and royalties, things that have been affected by just general trends and regulatory advances in publishing, we've over the last few years launched a few different custom publication programs. All of these programs are supported by either industry or grant funding, nonprofit foundation grant funding. There's a few requirements that we maintain for determining what to publish and what to seek information for. First, it must address the content gap. A particular title or concept must address a content gap, and it must be aligned with ADA's standards of care. We appoint and invite an independent editor, and that independent editor is responsible for overseeing all peer review and editorial development. We have a staff person, usually a contractor that we've worked with for a couple of decades, who is familiar with our publication policies, that ensures that the program adheres to quote unquote good publication practices for company sponsored content. It's basically the ICMJE policies, making sure that all your declarations, all of the transparency, all the disclosures are properly displayed and included. And there is a very distinct firewall. We make that very clear upfront between the independent editorial team, ADA appointed editors, and funders, and ADA. So some of the programs that we've launched in the past, if you go to the next slide. Okay, so when we seek funding, the information that we typically include for supporting information in our internal proposals for books, we do the same thing in our external in our proposals to external funders to, again, justify the need, justify the interest, support it, and then it's usually attached as an appendix, and then they could take that and share it with whoever they need to get approval for. It's usually somebody on the medical affairs team sharing it with somebody higher up in their program to get sign off on the program. But we think, we're not 100% sure that this type of information first helps our case and ADA's development staff cases when they're making a pitch for maybe a broader campaign that includes a custom publication. But we hope that it helps the sponsors' staff also make the case to their internal partners. And again, we're using that same information. And then when we're developing the content, we're again repurposing this same information to talk to our editors about contributors, topics, subtopics that we can include in the program based on, cites, Mendeley saves, and highly referenced content on that particular subject. So in many cases, it helps determine kind of the overall table of contents and outline for a particular program. Next slide, please. So the Compendium Monograph series, we launched, I guess in 2018 or 2019, and essentially these are open access Monographs, they're published print and online, and they're hosted on the same platform as almost like a review article, and displayed like a journal article. They're mailed as topical issues to ADA's professional membership, and then to a broader audience of primary care physicians. Obviously, they deal with a diabetes treatment related aspect, so foot care, eye care, diabetes and CKD, sleep, several others. And they're also indexed on NLM's bookshelf, which is like a PubMed for monographs and books. So they are assigned thereafter a PMID, which seems to resonate well with funders and contributors. And again, they're independently produced. They are supported by third parties, but the third party has no editorial discretion involved with the development of the concept. And the data that we provide related again to the development of this content typically helps inform who we invite, who we invite as an editor, and then who the editor invites as authors, and the development of any subtopics. Next slide. Similarly, we've done clinical video forums. They're follow the same pattern, a little more complicated because CME is involved, and typically have to work with a medical education company for the filming and hosting of the programs. But typically these programs are divided into 4 to 6 separate videos that are hosted on one of our journal sites, and then an executive summary is published in the pages of the journal, and inline displays the videos as well. Next topic. And then our podcasts have been very successful. The first one we've been publishing, Diabetes Core Update. It's kind of like a journal club of sorts for primary care. We've been publishing that one for going on 10 years. And then we have Diabetes Day by Day, which is about a year old. That's for patients and their caregivers. And Diabetes Care on Air is a journal-related podcast covering devoted to diabetes care, our clinical research journal. And Diabetes Bio is one that we're going to launch in December to coincide with our January 2024 issue for Diabetes Journal. Diabetes Core Update and Diabetes Day by Day have been really successful with serving as a vehicle for special editions, as we call them. They're essentially sponsored series, 2 to 3 episodes a piece that are interstitially published between our regularly scheduled monthly episodes. Like the other 2 programs, they are sponsored by third parties. But the third parties have no say-so in the development of the content. It's strictly determined by our editor/host of the programs. In the last 3 or 4 years, I think we've published 15 series in Diabetes Core Update. The last year we published 2 in Diabetes Day by Day. The revenue that we've earned from the special editions for Diabetes Core Update and Diabetes Day by Day have far outpaced advertising revenue for our 4 periodicals. So there's been a ton of interest in these programs, and again, the editors and the hosts, because they are focused on recently published literature, particularly for Diabetes Core Update. Obviously, we're using usage and citation metrics to help develop those programs and identify which pieces of literature are going to be highlighted and who we're going to invite to interview or serve on a panel and that type of thing, and to build a robust, comprehensive program that spans across 2 or 3 episodes. Next slide. So in summary, we're using bibliometric data in several ways. ranging from identifying emerging trends to analyzing, submission related trends and trying to figure out what the root cause for that decline in diabetes or where it's coming from. Assessing the relevance, need, and topic categories and journal sections. By doing a thorough analysis, you may identify certain topics or article categories that are no longer relevant, and maybe it's time to sunset those categories or repurpose them into something else. Identifying technical glitches, assessing, trying to forecast the current potential impacts of open access and public access. And the next slide is, and then, to support internal proposals to build a case for a new title, a new concept, a new program, and then to develop that new title and program and to seek funding for it. And then ultimately, I think to turn, the general state of VUCA-ness into to an opportunity or to identify opportunities. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Annette.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. Chris and Scott, both of you, thank you so very much for joining us today. You've given us a lot of great examples of different ways that citation and bibliometric analysis can be used to both guide and support a variety of strategic strategies and decisions that are being made for journals and portfolios. We very much appreciate both of you for joining us today and for your time.